Okay, I'm so excited because one of the things that I work with my students is writing narrative short stories.
Mhm.
And for this example, we're going to talk about students who are writing stories about crimes that have been committed and how evidence is collected and so forth. And so I thought, what better way to teach this than to actually interview someone with a long and decorated career in law enforcement. So, y'all,
Yes.
this is Mario Chaverria, and
Hello.
he joined the police academy in 1994 at the age of 22. And in 1996, he became a SWAT team operator and remained in that unit until 2015. And then after 14 years of working the streets on patrol, Mario was promoted to the rank of investigator in 2008 and was assigned to the crime scene unit as a crime scene investigator. After 3 years as CSI, Mario made detective where he remained. He has worked minor misdemeanor cases such as thefts up to major felony cases such as murders and child deaths. Mario has been helping people in need for 28 years and plans to continue his service as long as, in his words, God gives me the ability to do so. So
Yes.
welcome, Mario, and thank you for meeting with me to talk about how we can provide information enough to be dangerous to students who can write a short story, a narrative fiction story about a crime that was committed. So let's start by telling me, how do you first know that a crime was committed?
Well, first of all, Professor, thank you for allowing me to talk to your students. I appreciate them being interested in law enforcement, because law enforcement will always be needed out there in this world. So when a crime has been committed, usually somebody, a victim, a complainant, a reporting party will make the call, and they'll make a call to the police department, right? And then from there, the investigation will begin. It'll begin by first sending an officer to the scene, and then the officer in patrol in a uniform, which I did for many years. I'll get to the scene and meet with the victims, the reporting party, and all scenes are different. All calls are different. It could be a neighbor watering his yard and water falling onto his car, as simple as that. People call for that. Or it could be a theft or a stabbing. So usually the way the calls come in is that's how we initiate the call first.
Do they use a code word? So you're in your house, you get a call and they say, Officer Chaverria, we have a code.
Yes, yes, ma'am. It'll be, if we're on patrol, dispatch will call us. Usually our call signs are by numbers, and they'll call us. For example, the dispatch will be PD 802, right? The officer will respond, go ahead. And then it'll be like, okay, can you make it to this address for a 1010? That's a fight. Or a 1068, a theft. So there's 100 code words, code numbers that we need to memorize, because in order to keep traffic at a minimum, radio traffic at a minimum, we use 10 codes. So
Okay.
dispatch would be like, make it to this location for a 1061, a stabbing, for example.
Are those codes universal? Are they just germane to a certain district or state?
They're universal. Certain states vary a little bit of difference, but they're usually universal.
Okay, gotcha.
Yes.
Okay, so let's go to a dramatic crime scene. Let's say it's a crime scene where somebody's been murdered, and you get to the crime scene. What are the first things you do when you arrive? You get out of the car. Do you have the cup of coffee in your hand like they do on CSI?
No, first of all, in the patrol cars, they don't really have cup holders usually, for that reason. So officers won't have that. But it depends if you're responding. Let's say it's a murder scene. If you're responding as an officer, the first officer that gets there, it's going to be total chaos. So he's going to have to ask for help, right? Chaos, because there's going to be family members screaming, because if there's this, for example, a stabbing, right? Laceration to the throat or whatever, right? A murder. There's going to be kids crying. There's going to be pandemonium. There's going to be victims, or the victim's going to be, obviously deceased, but there's going to be all kinds of chaotic scenes, right? So the first thing the officer wants to do is get more officers to the scene to preserve the evidence, to control the crowd, right? And that's the initial call. All calls are different, but for example, in this one, it was an actual scene, and it was a woman that got her throat cut by her husband, and the kids were in the bedroom. They were crying. They saw what happened. So it's one of those chaotic scenes. As an officer, they respond and they secure the scene. They take everybody outside because the inside of the home will now be a crime scene, and then the detectives would come in. That's where I would come in.
Okay, so an officer got there first, and the
Yes.
officer got everyone out of the house in an effective way. And now we have people outside in chaos, still making a lot of noise and very upset. And now the officers called it in, and they called in for backup, and you arrive. And what do?
Yes, and the officers, they secure the scene, the perimeter. They tape with caution, do not cross, police tape all around the yard, for example, so people won't come in. And then there's an officer guarding there. Like whoever wants to come in, the officer has to note who came into the scene, because all this is going to be needed for court when it goes to trial. So if I come in, my team comes in of investigations. Okay, Detective Chaverria came in at this time. His supervisor, Sergeant Cardenas, came in at this time. So we're logged in. Once we go in, then we don't touch anything. We leave everything as is. The
You
body
put boots on something over your shoes?
It depends. If we have let's say the body is at a certain location and there's blood all over, there's no need for us to put stuff on our shoes unless there's a different kind of crime scene, and I'll go into that. But for a murder that just occurred, there's going to be blood, a pool of blood, but only in a certain area. So as far as our shoes, we're good without covering.
But you don't touch anything. Okay. So now you walk into the scene, and what do you do? What do you take in?
We start looking at everything, and a crime scene investigator, which was what I was also before, they go to the scene, and we're the ones that have the camera, the fingerprint kits to lift fingerprints and all that. So they start videotaping and photographing. At the same time, we start asking questions. Okay, who is this victim? From my experience, usually for female victims, it's always been a person of like a man, right? Either a boyfriend, a husband, or partner. So we start asking, okay, who's this lady and who is her husband or boyfriend from there? So we start asking questions, right? And then the most important thing, phones have helped us a lot solve cases. All we need to do is look at her phone, and the phone will tell us a lot as to her life, the boyfriends and etc.
Right. So now, at this point, just to ask you, is there ever a time where actual crime scene investigators, such as yourself, arrive at the scene? Let's say it's a scene where educators have been killed, and they look at each other and they go, well, I guess school let out early today. Do they ever say anything glib and silly like that, like the things Jerry Orbach would say? Or are they pretty serious?
They're pretty serious. Usually the crimes that have occurred, that I experienced, they're people that are kind of like not professional people. It's usually like people that are kind of poor people, usually uneducated or illegal, like they're here illegally. I've noticed that, or drug related. It has a lot of drug related, but there's sarcasm sometimes, not too often.
Okay.
I have gotten the ones that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, no, I get you. I get you. I always avoid that when I'm writing fiction in
Mhm.
putting in glib statements from the investigator as though this is just such a common thing, because it's seems to me more likely that there's a more serious tone and checking for things. Do you look up when you come in the crime scene, or do you stay down? I mean, when you take in, like, I
Mhm.
just want to come to that moment where you walk in and here is the room, here's the house, here's the room, it's been secured, everybody's outside, and you're inside. Do you look on the ceiling? Do you look down? What do you do?
We're always trained to do a 360, always on the ceiling. There, I had another suicide case where the guy um, shot himself, right? So on the roof, there was like a brain matter and like bone matter on the roof. So we always have to be like, okay, looking up, looking everywhere.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Got it. That's so interesting. You know, one of the things about that I I was watching that series, Making a Murderer. Did you see that
Mhm.
series?
Not yet. I haven't seen it. Mm-mm.
Okay, it's very interesting because they the investigators came into this crime scene, and on the fourth time out, the
Mhm.
fourth time that investigators came out, they looked down next to the filing cabinet and oops, there's a car key. And I thought, okay, so in the three times prior to this, they didn't see anything, and there in plain sight that anybody would be able to see was the key. So I like to check on those things. That's was an interesting part of that documentary series. But now we know what you do. You've got the photographers, videographers, you're taking notes, you use your phone to get information about the victim. And now after that's through, how do you create a list of suspects?
Yeah, before you answer that, you mentioned something that the investigator went back and found a piece of evidence. Well, we've experienced that too. And auto pedestrian evidence, like when, let's say a vehicle hits a pedestrian and kills them, or a motorcyclist, right? And they flee, they have, the only description was a black car, right? Nothing else, no license plates. So people are like a creature of habits, right? So if we go the next day and scope out the location of where it happened, people are usually, they have a routine. So like, let's say, for example, a person was hit, but no evidence, right? It's only a black car. The next day or the 3 days after, if we go back to the scene and just do a surveillance, most of the time, the suspect would pass by there again, because people are kind of like with their routines, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, let's say somebody was hit at the intersection, at a certain intersection, and there's no evidence. It's only a black car. So next day or 2 days later, we go back to the scene, and most of the time that person will pass by there again. The suspect will pass by there again because it's just a routine that people do. And then we would say, okay, that's the black car that hit the person and killed them.
I get you.
You know what I
I
mean?
get, that's so such a fascinating
Mhm.
job. So now you create your list of suspects, and how do you go about taking all that information that you got from the phone, from the videographers, from the police officer out front? You collect all that information, and then do you come up with a list of suspects?
Yes, and it's different. Like, for example, in that house, there was only one suspect, so that was an easy one. But let's say there's a different crime of theft, where there's a lot of people, right? So you would get, okay, who would have access to this location? Okay, we would get a list of people, and then each person, we would start looking at the person. Okay, this person, let's run their record. Okay, they're clean. This person, related, been arrested for drugs. Okay, well, let's look at that person. This person has been run the record. This person has been charged with a lot of thefts, right? Okay, let's talk to these two people. And so that's how we narrow down the suspects. And then we ask them for an interview. They volunteer to go to an interview with us. And then that's how we start breaking down, okay, who the suspect was.
Okay.
Um,
And then when you're talking to those guys, how do you know if one's lying?
okay, interviews, there's a lot of techniques and we never stop learning. I'm still learning how to do interviews because there's a lot of different techniques and different teachings of it. So first of all, let's say we have a person, right? And that person, we think it's a suspect. We'd ask the person, okay, how are your finances, right? Are you doing okay as far as money? Is there something that you need money for? You know, we write down a whole bunch of questions to be prepared to ask that person. Usually that person will break down and they say, yes, well, I did it because I needed money for this. So we use a theme. Okay, the theme of this person needed money for this. So I'm not saying you're like a criminal, you're not going to buy drugs with this, but you needed this item to sell, or this cash that you took to pay for the bills, to pay for your kids' diapers, right? And that's usually how a person would break down and admit guilt. Some don't. Some, you get to the scene and then, or to the interview room, and they're sitting with their arms crossed. So arms crossed means that they're like, no, I'm not gonna say anything. I'm not gonna talk to you. And that's it. Some people won't talk at all, but most of the people will.
And so telltale signs that the suspect is lying. What are like 3 or 4 telltale signs that you look for? You've eased into this by saying, so how are you? How are you doing? You need some money. Did you know, what's your situation, rather than where were you at the time of the crime? Where were you? I mean, you ease into that, but what are some telltale signs that you know that the person is lying?
Yes, and it's a rapport that you develop with a person. You don't belittle them or, you know, dehumanize them, nothing like that. You're offer them water. Say, hey, at any time you're free to leave, okay? Or just asking some questions. Do you want to go to the restroom? And you sit the person close to the exit, so you don't make the person feel like trapped. You sit the person close to the exit of the door, so you're free to go, or just ask you a few questions, you know. So we develop a rapport. And then the telltale signs for deception, there's a lot of them, but usually it would be you ask them a question and the person pauses and looks to the up left, or kind of like does a yawn, right? A yawn, body language. They stutter, they're sweating profusely, and the temperature in the room is 65 degrees, so there's no reason why they would sweat like that. So there's a lot of techniques that we can detect deception. There's also the polygraph. Sometimes, as soon as you ask, are you willing to give me a polygraph? If they say no, then that's another form of deception because they're trying to avoid it. But if they agree to a polygraph, a lie detector, they're usually being honest.
So any other, like flipping their hair or fiddling with their collar or anything like that?
Yes, you know, cracking their knuckles. That's a form of the body releasing stress of deception. Kind of like they pause. Like I have a little audio here of a guy that I'm asking him questions, and he pauses. See if I could play it and y'all can listen to this. So this is a guy that stole, he went into a doctor's office and he stole a purse from a doctor. And in the purse, she had her license, credit cards, and her cell phone. I know you've been arrested. So I'm gonna play a few seconds of this. Like, for thefts and drugs. That's me. Like all your information already. So can you help me out? Because look, if you don't return the stuff to me today, then we're gonna have to go downtown and get another warrant for you. Are you on parole? Are you on probation right now or parole?
Yes, I'm on probation.
And you
Yes.
So dude, come on.
How am I supposed to trade against it when I don't have them?
What did you do with them, Edgar, when you got them? It's on camera.
I never grabbed them.
So he's saying, I don't have them. I never took them, but I'm asking him, what did you do with them? I'm not asking him, did you take him? Because I have him on video going into the room, right? But I don't have him on video actually grabbing the stuff. So I'm asking him leading questions. Like, did you take the stuff? No, I'm asking him, what did you do with the stuff? Edgar, when you got him, it's on camera.
I never grabbed them.
You know that there's cameras everywhere. Didn't you look up on the ceiling to see the camera was looking at you?
No,
yeah.
I really didn't care about the camera because I didn't do anything wrong.
It sees you. You're there about 5 or 10 minutes, like outside the room, right? And then trying to get the courage to go inside, and then people come in and you're pretending you're like on the phone. And then finally, after a few minutes, you check the door and you go in, you get out with the stuff. And then when you're in the elevator, you're looking at the phone and stuff, at the items. So don't lie to me, man. I've been doing this for like almost 30 years, almost past more than what you have lived. What did you do with the stuff? Did you throw it away, or do you still have it? Can I get it from you? So he pauses there. He sighs. Yeah. That way I can help the doctor out and give her stuff back. See how he's pausing?
I don't have the stuff.
Where is it, or who did you give it to?
I never grabbed it.
No, okay. So we're just gonna have to type up a warrant, getting the case to her. Okay. So Mona silent, he's thinking. You know what I mean? ¿Entiendes, amigo? Sí. Y si yo soy detective Chaverria, that way I can give it to the doctor. Her social security, her ID, all her credit cards. And I also mentioned to him, I told him also I can give it to the doctor that helps people, the doctor that helps you. So I'm showing kind of like compassion. I'm not accusing him of being like, a crook for drugs or anything. So in the end, this interview goes very well because in the end, he tells me, okay, I have the stuff and I'll return everything to you. And in the end, he did. He returned everything to me.
I was just listening to the tone of your voice, and you don't show there's nothing accusatory in your tone. It's very matter of fact. Here are the facts. Here's the situation. And then I appreciate where you give information and then you ask a question and then you just have the patience to wait for the answer. That's so interesting. So that's one example of where you found the criminal and you use those techniques to get that criminal to say, okay, I have the drugs and now I'm going to return them. What about when it's a really, really serious offense, like a horrible murder, and you have found the guilty suspect? Are you able to maintain that same calm tone when you're sitting across from a person who's just committed something really terrible?
Yes, and that comes with the experience. There's been people that, I had this guy that he slashed his father's throat, right? And then the father's new girlfriend sees him, so he calls the police, right? And then the police officers find the truck They pull him over and they bring him over to the police station. And the police station, he's sitting down with his arms crossed like that. And again, I talked to him the same way I talked to this guy, but this guy was really like cold-blooded. I mean, if somebody has the willingness to kill their own father, they're not going to talk to anybody because there's something going on inside of them. So he's like that. And all he says was, I want to talk to my lawyer, right? And that was it. As soon as they say that, we can't talk to him anymore because of the Miranda warnings, the rights. Everybody has a right to remain silent, right? So it's only volunteer. It's if they don't want to talk to the police, they don't have to. So there's different types of criminals, like there's different types of people. Some will talk to you, some won't. Like, for example, this guy, he knew he was going to jail. So he was like, why am I even going to say anything? Because I have witnesses that saw me kill my father. So it all depends on the person. And people don't have the right to talk to us. That's their right. They have the right to remain silent because anything that they say can and will be used against them in court.
Right. And on TV shows, of course, they pay no attention to that. They say, why do you think you need a lawyer? And that always annoys me too, because that is the end point.
That's
but prior to that end point, so you want to, I would assume that you want to get them to volunteer information before they say that sentence, I want my lawyer. Yes. So is there something you do to disarm them or something like that when you come in the room to talk to them? So that you can get some voluntary information before that sentence?
Honestly, it's just being treating the person with decency, right? When I was a young detective, an older detective always told me, look, you get more with honey than with vinegar. So if you talk to the person, you know, if you're nice to them, if you're courteous, if you treat them with respect, 80-90% of the time they will talk to you. But then there's that person he's like a career criminal. He's been in prison before and he knows he's going back to prison. They won't talk to you. But if you treat a person with respect, with dignity, they will talk most of the time. And
of course, for our purposes in writing fictional work, they are going to need to be able to talk. So we need to set up a character of the detective to be the kind of person who's not off-putting, who is, you know, more compassionate, so that they can get the more compassion. So the last question I wanted to ask you is with the SWAT teams, because I know I'm interested in writing about SWAT operations. They sound very dramatic and they sound like they require a great deal of specific kind of training. Can you cover something, just sort of a story about your time on the SWAT teams and how cases come to them and how do those follow through?
Okay. For SWAT teams, it's kind of like a paramilitary team that we're equipped with equipment that a police officer would not have in their car. There's been, barricaded subject. There's been hostage takers, right? Hostages taken, for example, and it's happened a lot. A drunk father gets home, beats up the wife, right? And then now the wife calls. And then now the guy says, well, no, if the police come in, I'm going to shoot him, or I'm going to shoot your stepkids or whatever. So now there's a barricaded subject, right? So the police officers, since they don't have the equipment, they call a SWAT team. And a SWAT team is kind of like a paramilitary type style of police officer that has the gear, they have the armored vehicle, they have the negotiators, right? They have the snipers just in case they need to eliminate a threat. But that's what a SWAT team is. A SWAT team is when the police cannot handle a situation because it's too dangerous for the police officer or other people, then they call a SWAT team. Usually we have armored vehicles, we have better bulletproof vests. We have negotiators that would talk a person out. So that would be what a SWAT team is, kind of like a military police.
Okay. And they receive special training? Do they go to a special academy?
Yes, with a SWAT team, that's the thing. First, you have to wait a few years before you can apply. And once you apply, they select kind of like the officers that have never been involved in, let's say, complaints or excessive use of force. And then they have to be physically fit because they have to carry a lot of gear. Sometimes we have to stay out on a call 12, 24 hours. Okay, I had this call. It was at a welfare office, right? And a mother was tired of not getting help from assistance from the government, right? So she and her 2 kids went with a gun to the welfare office. So now it's a barricaded mom with her 2 kids, and she's just upset because she never got any help as far as like welfare or food stamps. So they call us out, right? And we surround the place. 12 hours went by, and then by the 20th hour, negotiations weren't working with her either, right? In the end, she ended up killing her own 2 kids, and then she shot herself. And so we were already outside ready, but we couldn't gain access into the building because if we gained access, she was going to kill him.
Everybody else in the room, right?
Yes, everybody else, the employees. It was a welfare office. I remember that one. And then, so we were stuck outside because if we made entry, you know, she was going to kill everybody inside, but we did make entry. So she still killed herself and her 2 kids. That was a horrible scene. So even the SWAT teams don't have the answers for the way people act in the, you know what I mean?
That's it. So people in that situation, the woman is under tremendous stress and duress. And so the negotiators, how are they communicating with her? By the phone, or they allow a negotiator to come in and
It's
the
a phone.
negotiator couldn't help her?
No, and negotiators are really good people that are really good speakers, and they go through a lot of training. But sometimes the person's what's going on in them, right? The mentality of a person is just, they reach their point and nothing would help. But the negotiators tried to help her on the phone. You know, we'll get you help. Think about your kids. You know, they don't need to go through this. But it's still, her mind was made up. That was a very horrific scene.
Have you been in other situations where the outcome was positive, where you've seen, tell us one about that. Let's end with one experience you've had that was really rewarding in a dire situation like that, a high stress situation, and it was a really rewarding outcome for you and the people you were working with.
Yes, most of the time, the outcome is, it comes out right. It never ends like this. This is like one in 100. But there's been a lot of times, like I said earlier, about the drunk father that's at home and beat up his wife and now has his stepkids at kind of like hostage, you know, like as hostages. So I remember this case, the guy, he disconnected the phone, right? So we have the negotiators in the SWAT team have a phone box that we approach the residents with a shield, and we throw in the box that has a phone, and then it has a cable going out. So the negotiators were able to talk him out of doing whatever he wanted to do, like hurt the kids and his wife. But usually, since it's kind of like stepkids, the love for them is not there. So if the negotiator hadn't, you know, talked him out of, you know, killing the kids, he probably would have killed them, because the jealousy when a person is intoxicated, and then the stepkids, you know, they don't belong to him, so there's not, the love isn't
Right.
there, so they can hurt him. That was one of the many ones.
Yeah, it sounds like an incredible situation. And it sounds to me just from this conversation that the stages of the crime are a perpetrator of the crime, a criminal, or somebody who is in a high stress situation, and they have one decision, and that decision sets off a chain of more decisions that result in the climactic action of something happening, a murder or stealing the purse from the doctor's office. And then is there a moment after that where the criminal goes, oh, this just happened. I didn't realize it was going to go this far. Or do they snap out of it at some point and then start going into how do I cover my tracks?
There's this thing called heat of passion, right? Sometimes in the heat of passion, people do outrageous things. They commit crimes, they commit murders. That's, I guess, the rage in the person. When the person is angry, if they have a very bad temper, you know, they have a temper that's too short, that instead of like putting up the fist to fight, they take out a gun and then kill the other person. So there's been several instances where the guy says, I'm so sorry, this happened. I don't know what happened. I just snapped. So in trial, his defense attorney would usually bring, my client was in the heat of passion. He found his wife with another man. He just snapped and he did this horrible thing. So yes, the heat of passion in a person can make that person do crazy things and evil things. So it does
Does
happen.
the act itself then snap them out of it? Or do they, it's like once that happens, once they do the thing that they're doing, do they then just stop and suddenly realize what's going on? The
Yes,
heat of passion is over?
Yes, once they're usually once they're already at the police station being interviewed, that's when they break down and start, what am I doing? What did I do? But during the event, their adrenaline and rush, their anger is just, it takes over their body. But once everything calms down, they're at the police station, they already drank some water, a refreshment or whatever, that's when they come up and like, what was I doing? I can't believe it. Going to jail now for my stupidity. And yeah, sometimes we feel sorry for people, but it's just learn to control themselves.
Yeah. And then after that, it seems that then the next phase after that, realizing what's happened, is now a lawyer comes in. You're going to be presented with a lawyer. And then it goes into another phase of how to cover or how to get away with this or something else. Is that?
Yes. After this, the defense attorney will try and get him off. And I've had defense attorneys that have to do their job. So even a child rapist or a child murderer, to a defense attorney, they're innocent and they're going to try and get them off. So that's the part, that's the court part, the trial. That's where they're going to get all the evidence that we gathered at a scene and then present it in court. That's why when we're at a scene, we have to be very careful not to disturb the evidence, you know, collect everything.
Yes.
Write everything down, diagram, because in court, they're going to find something to try and make the police look stupid. I said, oh no, this police officer, the detective made stupid mistakes. So that's why my client is charged. So once the crime scene is ended and the person is arrested, that's only the beginning. The hard part comes when it goes to trial, because the evidence will be presented.
Right. And well, this has been so wonderful. I really do appreciate this. And so do my students. You've given us lots to work on and think about. And then use that logic in creating fictional characters. So Mario, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your wisdom, and thank you for your service. You do a tremendous job. It ain't for sissies. I can't
Yes,
even
Professor,
imagine.
yes. And it's an honor for me to be here and help you and your students. Just remember, you never stop learning. You're always learning. I'm 50 years old and I'm still learning. There's all types of classes and trainings that if you one day decide to become a police officer or a detective, you will go to so many interrogation classes, crime scene classes that you will learn a lot.
It would even be a good idea for somebody who wants to write crime stories to take one of those classes online or something to get some more information. But thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop the recording here, and thank you
Okay.
so much.